little more concerned. So we've talked about third parties, but and the FTC regulation. But what I was wondering about was essentially home consumer devices that are essentially a rogue device, and they can monitor information. And I'm not sure if we can really stop that yet. But then there's also the exfiltration of that information, and it could use maybe the user's router if it has a wired connection to their network. It might even perhaps go through an AMI meter. So my question really comes down to what are you doing about the architecture? How are you involved in this situation?
That's a question probably for someone else in my company. I know that we are looking at security very closely, particularly concerned with how attaching a device on the customer side of the meter may impact our own meter security. But I think you said it, we don't have the ability to tell the customer they can't do that. And so that is going to be only as good as the product the customer buys, only as good as the security on their own wireless system if that's what it's being used for. I think there's an opportunity there for education, both from the utility and probably from the state commissions of consumers so that they understand, risks and what they may want to do. But it's challenging.
My second question is on the anonymization of data. So a few years back where AOL released research data that basically contained private information of customers, and essentially researchers then de-anonymized and anonymized that data. And then there's a lot of media fallout from that. So how are you vetting that this data is truly anonymized?
That is really a good question. What is it? Netflix also just recently had a class action brought against them for people's movie preferences being able to be tied back to the individual. Now, when I'm thinking about what is, personal and private data, I never thought my movie preferences would qualify, but obviously it passed muster long enough to get a fairly sizable settlement. The level of aggregation is a challenge there. I think particularly when we are trying to provide information to governmental entities measuring carbon or measuring kilowatt usage within small communities, where you may not have very large numbers of representatives within a particular rate class. And how do you, if you back out say a large commercial customer, but you still give a total for that geographic location, you've basically given them what you backed out. It is an imperfect situation right now, which is why I was very curious as to whether our friend from California liked 1515, because it's been offered up in Colorado in the rulemaking as at least one way to try and get at this, where we can satisfy the need of third parties, many of them governmental entities, to have fairly detailed data, but at the same time try and preserve privacy and security.
Back to your question on architecting. The utilities, the third parties are going to have to implement security and requirements into their complete development life cycle and to idiot-proof the home, even though they have no control over the home. And if my 13-year-old does get on my computer remotely, can they start turning on and off the air conditioning? Can they start turning on and off the pool pump? So somehow doing that segregation of duties, the role-based access, and educating, all of this is going back to the education. So the utilities and the third parties are going to have to do that combination throughout their whole product life cycle.
Yeah, the reason why I asked that particular question is because even when just the devices query the AMI device, they can learn information and basically come up with information that may not necessarily be answered in a single question, but over multiple questions. And so that's where I think that I didn't know if that was really being addressed right now.
So let me address the anonymization issue. This is an extremely complex issue, and utilities are not the only ones struggling with it. I've done a lot of work for payment card companies, and as they get into information business, they have the same problem. And the sort of the first level, and we're talking about the AOL disclosure and the Netflix disclosure, is when you take a database, an identifiable database, record level database, remove an identifier, let's say name or an account number, but you still have a record level data, and that record level data, and disclose that to a third party, there's a very high risk that it could be re-identified, triangulated somehow through other publicly available information and be made personal. And I think that, well, I can tell you for sure, in Europe, that information would not be considered anonymous, right? So there is a high risk, if there's a high risk of re-identification, then it's a huge concern. Now, you can take aggregated data and further aggregate it into models, for example, or get usage data and not have record level, then the risk is lower. But what gets you there is very complicated. In the US, there's really no legal framework for anonymization. There is some under HIPAA, the health privacy law. How useful it is, I mean, then you have to hire a statistician, essentially, to run your analysis. But the law is old. I'm not sure that the assumption built into it are useful today, just because the technology the ability to triangulate and re-identify data are just, the computing power is there to do it on large scale. So there's really no clear answer, and I think it's going to be an ongoing debate of what it means for information to be truly anonymous, and if it's even possible.
Well, I see Mike is up here with the hook, so I think we're done. Let me just put two things out there. It's not something for discussion here because we could spend weeks on it, but something to be thinking about is, what about law enforcement access? That's a huge one.
Next Smart Grid conference.
Okay. You're going to spend the whole week on that, I presume. The other thing is, if you're interested in the privacy discussion that's going on, the SGIP has, as a subset of the cybersecurity working group, a privacy subgroup that is working from the privacy chapter of the NISTR and fleshing it out, expanding it, putting feet on the ground with it. If you're interested in helping out, I know that we could use the help. Can I volunteer you, Sandy? And I'll also, if you want to find out how to get on that group, talk to either me or Sandy. Thank you.
I just want to quickly plug the ABA Information Security Committee Smart Grid Privacy Information Security Working Group. We're going to be trying to compile a database of existing laws that affect privacy and information security in the smart grid. So if anyone wants to contribute and has concerns or wants to contribute to the committee, please, working group, please let me know.
Great.
Give them all a big hand. Wasn't that great? I also wanted to add one more thing because it didn't come out here. In working in various groups with the AMI vendors, because all AMI vendors are currently focused on Europe besides the United States, Europe has very, very strict privacy laws. And I will tell you, the AMI vendors are paying very close attention to privacy concerns right now. Very close attention to it. So, thank you very much.